Hello and welcome to Aviation This Week on Channels Television. I'm Bukola Joe Oketumbi, and we're reaching you today from the Muritala Mohammed International Airport domestic area in Lagos. The International Air Transport Association in May 2020 predicted that the COVID-19 pandemic crisis will put over 120,000 Nigerian aviation jobs at risk, as well as over $900 million of the country's gross domestic product. At the moment, an appreciable number of staff who proceeded on unpaid leave in March 2020 have not been called back to work, and some pilots in some airlines agitate over pay cuts. That's our theme on the program, and our background report begins with aviation job losses in other climes.
The airline industry has no doubt been under the pump due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Airline companies have before reduced flight hours, grounded their fleet, laid off people as travel restrictions were imposed by government. Global airline body, the International Air Transport Association, says the industry is expected to lose over $84 billion in 2020 for a net profit margin of minus 20.1%. Revenue losses are expected to fall by 50% to $419 billion from $838 billion in 2019. In 2021, IATA predicts losses are expected to be cut to $15.8 billion as revenues rise to $598 billion. Amidst the massive losses, many countries have or are flattening the curve of infections from COVID-19 and resumed flight operations, but the lockdown and its attendant effects has put the industry in deep trouble, the crisis of job losses. Taking off in the United States, airlines have warned they must shrink due to the coronavirus pandemic and are encouraging employees to accept voluntary departure deals in the hope of avoiding involuntary furloughs in the fall when $25 billion in government bailout funds run out. Southwest Airlines have received interest from 28% of its workers for extended leave or exit deals, while Delta Airlines said it was reviewing its pilot staffing after 2,234 bids for early retirement. Southwest, with around 60,900 employees in 2019, said it would accept applications from 4,400 for early retirement and evaluate nearly 12,500 requests for extended time-off packages. The numbers represent around 24% of Southwest pilots and 33% of flight attendants. In June, Delta spokesman Michael Thomas said early retirement bids from 2,234 pilots had been received as the airline sent furlough warnings to around 2,500 pilots. Airlines are generally reluctant to lose pilots because of the timely and costly training needed to bring them back. While millions of U.S. workers thrown into unemployment by the coronavirus pandemic fret about feeding their families, Germany's state-subsidized Kurzarbeit furlough scheme is helping those the other side of the Atlantic get through the crisis. While Juan Reyes in Los Angeles isn't sure how to make ends meet since stopping work at the start of the crisis, it led German airline purser Marco Tode has the peace of mind to be mostly worrying about what to do for his next holiday. Tode, 41, hasn't flown for work since April, but Germany's Kurzarbeit scheme and a top-up from employer Lufthansa means he is getting 90% of his regular income and has the cash to explore what few leisure options there are in an economy still emerging from lockdown.
Yes, you can really rely on it, and I'm happy for it because in the last years you paid in Germany a lot of taxes and for social security, and I'm happy that the company still gives the increase in the short time allowance. But this ends in the end of August, and then the union has to go into new negotiations with Lufthansa to see if they still can afford the increase. Otherwise, we would fall back at the beginning of September to the 60%.
Now to Nigeria. The International Air Transport Association, IATA, has estimated a loss of 3.5 million passengers due to restrictions necessary to curb the pandemic. IATA estimates that COVID-19 crisis puts 124,000 Nigerian jobs at risk. Few staff at work in the large aviation hall. A much more larger figure will not be returning to work anytime soon, as airline traffic and the restart has not been encouraging. Most airline staff had proceeded on unpaid leave at the start of the lockdown at the end of March, with most not earning salaries for the past 4 months.
You don't just wake up and tell me you're paying me 20%. You call me to the table, we discuss. I will tell you 20%, 30, you say 20. At the end of the day, we agree on a common ground. And when that happens, everybody smiles at the end of the day. Dialogue is the solution to every conflict.
Just recently, one of Nigeria's leading airlines, Air Peace, had to cut pilot staffing by 50% after its pilots protested against pay cuts in the midst of the pandemic. An official of NAPI believes dialogue and not force should have been employed before this drastic action. The carrier, in its response, said it had to take a very painful but rightful decision in the circumstances the airline had found itself as a result of the devastating effects of the pandemic on its operations and financial health to terminate the employment of some of its pilots. Here at the Bristow helicopters headquarters in Lagos, pilots and engineers working with the aviation company blocked the entrance of the facility in protest against pay disparity between expatriates and Nigerian nationals. The affected workers, under the aegis of National Association of Aircraft Pilots and Engineers, also rejected the benchmarking salaries of indigenous pilots and engineers at 34 naira to the dollar, saying the rate was obsolete.
When you are being paid at 3.45 per dollar, and then the same staff is asked to buy a ticket at 460 from his salary, is that fair?
No.
Some were even asked to buy at NAFEX rate, which we were asking them to give to us, and they refused to give to us. But they still want to continue paying us 345. Now they foolishly ask us to take 355. While the experts, they come into this country, those that are supposed to be experts who get trained here, they get some of their qualifications here. They pay them $2. And then we, that were in our own country, where they get the money from, they decide not to give us. They still want to shortchange them. Because that is what they use to declare as general profit for them to eat every time. And this, we are saying no to this.
Where employees cannot are compelled to stop talking or not to ask for what rightfully belongs to them in terms of conditions of service, to negotiate that. I think that's more like telling you to keep quiet and not exercise your freedom as it's expected within the boundary of the law.
The management of Bristow Helicopters has denied the allegations, saying and described the strike by the workers as illegal. The company insists the action of the workers runs contrary to the provisions of the Nigerian labour laws and practices, adding that it remained committed to continuing the dialogue with the association.
To employ Nigerian workers and treat them like second-class citizens in their own nation.
Labor issue, to my mind, it's always an ongoing issue, and to be agitating for equality of expatriates versus local pilots at this time, at this point in time, I consider insensitive. I am sure that this issue must have been on table before their management, long before now. I will blame both parties, both the management and labor in that particular airline. I think they should come to table. If we can judge, we don't need to war. Everybody had to come to a good understanding at this time so that the future of the business is secured. I think the decision by Airpeace is absolutely necessary, because if you hear the impact of COVID globally, all kinds of palliatives have been rolled out for airlines out there. I am aware that government has spoken about palliative. I am not aware if action has been taken. I do know that some of the airlines have filled application forms submitted to central bank for one palliative or the other, whether it's going to be loan at single digit interest rate and so on and so forth. I am not aware if disbursement of any disbursement has been made, even if it is a loan. We are 6 months into this crisis. I am not aware if our airlines have gotten palliative, all the kind of palliatives that were described. Not take cash, free cash. No. Is it loan at lower interest rate? Is it subsidy on rate of fuel? What kind of support have our airlines got? And so if any airline, if you look at the airline worldwide, the average number of workers per aircraft is in the neighborhood of 150, 100 per aircraft. But because this is Africa, we are labor intensive. We haven't deployed too much technology. You see some of our airlines still having 200, 250 workers per aircraft. And if the aircraft are not functioning, what do you want those workers to do? Where do you want the income to come from? So I think what Airpeace, and I am particularly concerned, as a major stakeholder, that we're having a lot of charter flights, and I questioned yesterday, the evacuation flights, are they replacing commercial flights? If all the protocols have been set and put in place for our airports, for the ground handling companies, for all stakeholders, what is keeping commercial flight operations? If the protocols that support Lagos Abuja domestic flights are international global standard, what is keeping our regional flights? What is holding our international flights? Are we going to begin bilateral negotiations all over between one country and the other? Or we're going back to airline business? The pains, the empty treasury, not only of the airlines, all allied services, the airports and everybody, it's growing by day. And what we're hearing is that charter flights are going on here and there. It's called evacuation flights. And I said, can somebody define for me the difference between evacuation flights and commercial flights? Especially when those flights are being sold, passengers are paying, the protocols are made, certification for COVID-19 is taken. That is a commercial flight. So we can as well open the commercial flight so that our airlines can go back to business, our airport can go to business, the travel agents can go to business. Otherwise, that sector may go into total collapse. And to take off will not be very easy.
When we return after the break, Aviation this week honors the memory of Tolulope Arotile, Nigeria's first helicopter combat pilot who passed away in July. We bring you the story of two women blazing the trail in their own way.
Tolulope Sarah Arotile was the first ever female combat helicopter pilot in the Nigerian Air Force. She contributed significantly to combat operations against insecurity in the northern states of Nigeria. Arotile passed on from a head injury she sustained from a freak accident at the Nigerian Air Force Base in Kaduna State in July 2020. In a tribute to her pioneering efforts, we bring to the fore two women making strides in the aviation industry. Meet Taiwo Ajayi. She's the first female investigator at Nigeria's Accident Investigation Bureau. A graduate of biochemistry from the University of Lagos, finding work in aviation after school presented the opportunity to train as an investigator with a tedious and thorough journey.
Aviation being an industry that is highly regulated, having trained personnel to carry out their duties, with my background qualification, I was scheduled to attend the standard air traffic control course at Nigerian College of Aviation Technology, Zaria. So after that, we went through the diploma course, went through the flight experience training, and after that, we now went to the field to get the license so that we will have a hands-on feel of what the job is about.
Air accident investigation doesn't come easy. Review sessions like this are part of the deal that leads up to a robust report, and Taiwo is the only woman in the room at this time. How has this affected her journey?
I just feel that saying somewhere is male-dominated does depends on the mind of the individual. If you might feel it, because definitely a woman will always say when she sees herself just only her in the midst of men, she might feel. But I just believe that once you put your mind that okay, it's my work I want to do, and have cordial relationship with your colleagues, I don't think there is much challenge.
With 34 safety investigators hard at work at AIB, the agency is keen on playing a massive role in the West African sub-region. From accident investigation to another woman promoting the industry via new media, popularly called Mama J, Joy Wigwa has almost 30 years of aviation experience, with 15 years as an active flight attendant. She has come through the ranks as cabin crew, pursuer, cabin services supervisor, line trainer, and performance manager. Her journey to the cabin started in 1992 with a dream of wearing the Virgin Atlantic uniform.
I started with Okada Airlines. That was in 1992. Virgin Nigeria, I would tell you, was the high point in my career. My interview session was so interesting. Then they told me that the last thing they needed me to do was to go to a room. They told me the room I should go to, that I should try the uniform on. They actually gave us Virgin Atlantic uniform, cabin crew uniform, to fit in. And when I was in the fitting room, when I put on that uniform, I looked at myself in the mirror and I said, dreams to come true.
Taking her experience after 25 years into new media is driven by the passion to inform others about the aviation industry.
The aviation industry was not really projected in positive light. It was more of the negative. I observed that it was when there was something negative happening, maybe a plane crash or something negative, that was when the social media, aviation industry was hyped. There was so much hype about the industry, but there was not much given to the positives. So I told myself that this is an industry I've been for a long while. Why not tell the story from within? Why not change that narrative? That was how I started blogging.
With a degree in mass communication from the Delta State University, a diploma in social work from the University of Benin, and other qualifications, Joy also takes pride in being a mother to her young adult son.
Life has gradually returned to the Yakubu Gowon Airport with the resumption of aviation activities after the last flight on the 26th of March 2020 owing to the COVID-19 pandemic. At the terminal, managers have put in place necessary equipment needed for the resumption of flights, with the provision of disinfectants of luggage, hand wash points, hand sanitizers, as well as maintenance of specified physical distance. In spite of the unfriendly climate in the early hours of the day with foggy weather condition, air travelers could not hold forth after 4 months of no flights as they thronged into the airport for their journey.
We thank God that the flight is resuming in Jos Airport. We have almost about 4 or 5 months back that flight has been cancelled because of this coronavirus thing. And before we actually start, we have put many things in place for the safety of the passengers. You can see we have ocean bays in there. We have on the inside we have taps, and all those things we have mentioned now. And we find out that it is there. So we will actually plead with the passenger to please use all these things.
And when the flight eventually landed, it was a reflection of how passengers have been longing for the air journey, with 86 passengers arriving from Lagos while 50 boarded for the return trip.
I feel so glad, I feel so relieved to be able to fly directly from here back to Lagos. The measures are very, very good, very, very okay. In fact, more than I expected, right from the entrance, the sanitizing, everything is good, it's safe. At first I was a bit skeptical, but with what I have seen on ground, I think it's safe. Our lives are coming back to normal, and it's wonderful.
With the return of domestic flights to the Jos Airport, industry experts ask that passengers adhere to the COVID-19 guidelines, while the airport authority ensure that the facilities provided are functional at all times. Now to the foreign scene. Global Airlines cut their coronavirus recovery forecast, saying it would take until 2024, a year longer than previously expected, for passenger traffic to return to pre-crisis levels. In an update on the pandemic's crippling impact on air travel, IATA cited slow virus containment in the United States and developing countries, as well as a weaker outlook for corporate travel.
Estimate that we should come back to normal times, to the 2019 figures, 1 year later than in our previous forecast. So it's more in 2023, 2024 than before, in which we were forecasting that for 2022, 2023. Secondly, for the end of the year, we forecast that we should be at 45% of the 2019 traffic, whereas a few months ago we were forecasting that it would be between 50, 60, so around 55% of the 2019 figures.
The Boeing 737 MAX family inched closer to return to service following the U.S. Federal Aviation Administration's release of a proposed airworthiness directive calling for 4 key design changes surrounding the maneuvering characteristics augmentation system MCAS and the angle of attack sensors. The FAA says the notice of proposed rulemaking, which will be open for comment for 45 days, stems from the ongoing review of the MAX family in the aftermath of the Ethiopian Airlines Flight 302 and the Lion Air Flight 610 fatal accident, and its accompanying preliminary summary of the FAA's review of the Boeing 737 MAX. The summary, according to FAA, will be updated as it continues to work with Boeing on the certification review of the MAX family, which has been grounded now for well more than a year. It's a wrap on Aviation this week. See you next time, God's willing. And do stay safe. I'm Bukola Joe Oketumbi.